So let's now take a look at how we can combine our date and time so that when we do submit our form, we're not sending up two separate dates and times for the same activity. And what we'll do is we'll head back into VS Code. And what we'll do is before we submit the form, so we'll take a look at our handle form submit method. And before we actually submit our values, we'll take our two separate dates time objects and combine them into one single date and time. And what we'll do is we'll create a helper method to do lists, and inside our source folder, inside the common folder, let's create a new file, or a new folder, called util. And inside the util folder, I'm going to create a new file and just call it util.ts. And this will be a general purpose file for any helper methods that we might want in our application. And in this case, what I'm going to do is export a const of combine dates and time, and as parameters we'll take the date, which is going to be a type of date, and we'll take the time, which is also going to be a type of date. Now, unfortunately in JavaScript there's no method to do this automatically with date objects, so we kind of have to do this manually and build up a date and time string that we can then combine this together and return as a date object. So what we can do, and what we will do, is say const time string equals time.getHours, and then we'll say plus, and then we'll add a colon and plus, and we'll say time.getMinutes, and then I'll just make some space, and then we'll say plus, again apostrophes, and then we'll say colon 00. So this is going to give us our hours followed by a colon, then our minutes followed by a colon, and then 00. We're not interested in the seconds in this case. We're not interested in that level of accuracy for the time that an activity is going to take place. So what I'll do then is I'll just go out and get the date elements, and what we need is the year. So I'm going to say const year equals date dot get full year, and then we'll do the same for month, and we'll say month equals date dot get month, and the months, this is going to return a number, and it's going to start at 0, and we need this to be the actual number of the month of the year, so we need to add +1 to this. And then we'll say const day equals dates dot get date in this case, and we want get date in this case because this is going to get the day of the month, whereas get day gives us the day of the week, and we want the date, so the day of the month in this case. And I've said const date there, this should say const day. And then we'll create a date string based on the information that we now have. So I'll say const date string equals, and then we'll use backticks and say $year, and then we'll add a dash and say $and month, and then a dash and say $and day. And then what we can do is create a new date based on our date string and our time string. So we'll say return new dates, and we'll pass in our date string, and then we'll say plus apostrophes with a space, and that space is important, and then we'll say time string. And this is going to give us our combined date and time based on the date and the time that we pass into this as parameters. So with this in place, let's go back to our activity form and make sure this works. And inside our handle final form submit, what we'll do is we'll say const date and time equals combine date and time, and we'll say values.date and values.time. And what we also want to do is omit the date and the time separate values from our values, and then add to our values the date and combines date and time, so that when we log our values, we're logging the combines date and time for our activity as opposed to the two separate ones. And what we can do to achieve this is we can omit properties from an object using the spread operator. And what we can do is we can say const, and then we can say date and time, and then we can use the spread operator, and we'll just say activity, in this case, equals values. And let's just spell activity correctly. And what's going to be inside the activity object, and we can access this by its name directly, is going to be all of the properties inside this values object minus the date and the time. And then we can use this activity object, and we can say activity.date equals dates and time. And then instead of logging values, we can log our activity. So let's go and check to make sure this has worked. And I'll just head back to our create activity form, and I'll click on the 10th of July, and I'll click the time as 10:30 AM. And if I click submit, then what we get as our date property is the Wednesday the 10th of July at 10:30. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So we've finally got a date picker that's doing the job of selecting a date and time, and it's quite a lot of work to get to this place, so I really do appreciate that. But dates at this moment in time, in the world of JavaScript, in the world of development, continue to be painful to work with. I imagine one day that we'll just be able to use a HTML date picker and then just use CSS to style it, and it's going to be a consistent experience across all browsers. But that day is not today, so we're still using JavaScript solutions to provide date picker functionality. So now we've got our form inputs created, our city and our venue are just going to be string inputs. What we want to look at next is the other part of our form functionality, which is to initialize the form data for an already existing activity. And if I click on view and click on manage events, we can see that we're not populating our activity inside our form at this moment. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at how we can achieve that next.